one thing that the Labour government are considering is cutting the amount of time prisoners stay locked up. That is because our packed prisons are on the brink of collapse, according to a government report. And what's being blamed for the overcrowding in our prisons, according to the Independent Sentencing Review, is knee-jerk and ill-considered attempts by ministers to show that they are tough on crime by essentially increasing the length of sentences. The number of people locked up in England and Wales has grown by more than 10% in the past 25 years. Now, the report blames successive governments for increasing the severity of sentences, leading to prison terms increasing by 40% since 1993, when the average custodial sentence length for indictable offences was 16 months. It's now 22.5 months. And it says that this hasn't been a deterrent. 37% of those leaving prison are likely to reoffend, the highest rate of reoffending after people serve sentences shorter than 12 months. All right, so if we're cutting sentences and we're saying, but the problem is people doing less than 12 months, it means they're more likely to reoffend. Make that make sense. Anyway, let's just speak now to Danny Shaw, policing, crime and justice commentator, former advisor to Yvette Cooper. Danny, great to have you back on the show. I see a lot of sense in talking about prisoner rehabilitation, because the problem we have now is a lot of prisoners go to prison and it ends up being the university of crime, and they're not trained in anything else. They're then reintroduced to society, having made even better contacts in the criminal underworld, go back into the networks and the communities that they're previously involved with, and just pick up where they left off. But is reducing prison sentences going to wave the magic wand and cure that?
It's not going to cure it, no. I think, Alex, you've hit the nail on the head. Look, prisons are incredibly important. They're vital at protecting the public. They're vital because they give the communities, neighbourhoods and all of us a rest from prolific offenders. For some people, they act as a deterrent. And they're also a place for some people where they can rehabilitate, where they can learn some skills, do some training and come out, hopefully, and lead more productive lives. But the problem, for me, the problem is not so much that sentences have got longer and that people are spending longer in prison. I personally think that was the right thing to do in response to concern about violent crime and sexual crime, where the sentences didn't appear to fit the crime. I think the problem is what happens in prison, as you say, that there's not enough productive work going on. There's not enough training. There's not enough effort going on into managing the transition between release from prison and what happens in the community. And so I think that is the key problem. There's been a lack of investment in opportunities in prison.
I mean, are prisons by and large too soft as well? Because there's one school of thought that a load of prisoners are sitting around smoking spice, playing on PlayStations and having a great old time. But other people I've spoken to have said, no, this is a myth that's been proliferated by right-wing media. Most prisons are really horrific places to be, and, you know, essentially run by very violent gangs where prisoners feel extremely unsafe and get deeper and deeper into, you know, the sort of lifestyle, if you will, for want of a better phrase, that we're supposed to be rehabilitating them of.
Look, I've been to quite a lot of prisons in my time covering policing and crime and justice, and I'm always absolutely delighted at the end of the day to be able to get out, because it's the deprivation of liberty. It's being locked in your cell. It's not being able to do what you want. That is the key thing. That is why most people, I think if you ask people who spent time in prison, they would say they absolutely hated it. The boredom is also something else. Of course, there are a minority of prisoners for whom the routine, the 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day, knowing that they got a place, a bed for the night, provides some kind of routine and comfort in a way, because life for them on the streets is really harsh and difficult. And then there are some who, you know, abuse the rules, abuse the system, smoke weed or spice, and they might have a TV set. But to be honest, I think for most people would say prison's not fun. It's not like it was in Porridge. It's not a a holiday camp at all. It's pretty grim, it's pretty boring, and in some places it's violent. You've really got to watch your back.
I mean, when you look at what's gone on in El Salvador, the massive crackdown on crime there, it looks pretty impressive. I mean, whether or not this is going to work in the long term, only time will tell. But certainly it's got all the sort of indications that actually a heavy-handed, strict approach over there has definitely got a lot of criminals off the streets at the very least. So much so that I think I heard the other day there might even be a deal between America and El Salvador to send some of their prisoners down, across the border to be taught a few life lessons. But a picture was put up by Bukele, the president of El Salvador, the other day on the internet, showing what looks like a massive aircraft hangar of prisoners all working. It looks like they're at sewing machines or something. And I've often asked myself this, and correct me if you think this is a mad idea. Some people say, oh no, this is going to be a pull factor. But I've thought, when you've got all these men who are at the moment put in army barracks and put in hotels, milling about doing absolutely nothing, have come into the country illegally, couldn't they be put to work in the fields of this country, where at the moment we're relying on a load of other young men coming from places like Lithuania? Why aren't we? Is it possible to use A, illegal immigrants, and B, prisoners to start picking up some of the slack in this country?
I think it's a really good idea, Alex. I mean, prisoners do some work. The difficulty is that there are two things. Firstly, some prisons are just not able or equipped to, have workshops and factories and so on site where they can do that. And obviously some prisoners can't do day release in the community. It's not safe. And the second thing is that when they're released from prisons, there are some employers that will take ex-offenders on, but there are many that don't want to take that risk. In terms of asylum seekers, there's basically rules that say anyone who claims asylum cannot work for 12 months. And then they can only do it with the permission of the government if it's in an occupation where there's a shortage of labour. So you've got a lot of people who are waiting up to 12 months for their asylum claims, and they are not allowed to work. So what they do is they might end up going into the black economy, doing work that way. Right. I personally agree with you. I would relax the rules, and at least for a trial period, to see whether you can get some of those people who are living in hotels, and we're all paying for it. We're paying for it with our taxes, to go and fill some of those shortages. I would try it out to see whether it acts as a pull factor for other people coming in, or whether it makes no difference and actually it does plug some of those gaps in the labour force.
Right, I actually think it wouldn't be a pull factor if you said, taxpayers are paying for you. You've come into this country and we're sticking a roof over your head. In the meantime, collect some dustbins, sweep some streets, clean some toilets, pick some fruit. I'm not saying give them jobs in the tech sector where they're rolling around on beanbags at Google or something like that, but, give them the jobs that we constantly say Brits don't want to do. And I think if people getting on boats thought that, they'll arrive, they'll be put into, very basic accommodation and then, made to put on a jumpsuit and go out and, scrub graffiti off walls, they'd be less inclined to come over here. I don't understand why we haven't joined these dots together, unless, of course, it's probably in ECHR legislation that we can't do that.
It's not. It's not, Alex.
Is it not?
It's a decision by the previous government, and this government has carried it on. You can't work if you're claiming asylum until at least 12 months have passed.
Right. So actually the government would be perfectly entitled to say you can work, but it's got to be in all of these government-approved schemes. And like I said, our local authorities massively strapped for cash. I don't think we should necessarily pay these asylum seekers. The food, the roof over your head is basically, your recompense. And I don't think that's particularly too strident. Don't come over and get all this stuff for free. Pull your finger out, sunshine. Now, talking about migrants, we've learnt that migrant hotels are set to be used for 4 more years as Labour pushes back the deadline again. Well, it's just going to keep going back and going back because smashing the gangs isn't working. We're talking about packed prisons. We're now at the situation where certain asylum centres, there was a particular one in a village in Essex near Braintree, you might know the one I mean, that's going to potentially have 200 more people added to the 600 that are already there, something like 600. And the number of migrants in this, I think it's an old army barracks, is going to outnumber the number of villagers. And not just that, the doctors who are working in that huge asylum centre say that around 75% of them are mentally disturbed because they've come from extreme violence. And these guys are just wandering around. They're allowed to get a minibus into Chelmsford or Braintree. They're just wandering around in the streets. And you think to yourself, at what point is this going to create a disaster?
Yeah, I've actually been to Weathersfield, which is what you're talking about, and to the area around there. It's completely ill-equipped for an asylum centre or for a prison, which was the original idea, because it's in the middle of the countryside. It's surrounded by small villages. The infrastructure around it is non-existent. The roads, there are small country roads. As you say, the nearest town I think is Braintree. So they go there to Braintree and just sort of mill around, not very much to do. It's a nightmare, frankly, for local residents and for the people who are there, who don't really have very much support in the centre either. And it's a consequence of the fact that we've just got this huge backlog of asylum claims that was allowed to grow under the previous government. And this government is trying to get it down, but it's going to take years. And as you say, a story that I did today in the Telegraph with Charles Hymas, stating that we now know that backlog in hotels, asylum seekers in hotels, that's going to be there for the next 4 years, because it's proving so difficult to process applications. And then you've got more people coming across the channel in small boats.
Danny Shaw, it's fantastic catching up with you, a man of great common sense.